Oh boy, here we go. Evan is the only class in MapleStory that has a dragon companion attacking alongside all their attacks. Their whole playstyle revolves around attacking simultaneously with their dragon through various spells and combinations known as fusion skills. Utilized properly, especially at 5th job onward, Evan gets some crazy burst potential for bosses, at the cost of learning some setups and such. Their training overall is pretty comfortable too. People's main concerns with Evan stems mainly from learning all their various fusion combinations and how to apply each one properly. So let's get into it and explain how to simplify all that. Starting from the beginner tab. Not much here really. Inherited Will is a skill you unlock at level 140 after completing a bunch of Silent Crusade quests, which I think is part of Evan's class quests. It just gives 10 magic attack and all stats. While we're here, I might as well mention the biggest reason people push their Evans to level 210. Their Link skill, Rune Persistence. It extends the duration of all runes you pop. At level 1 it extends it by 30%, and at max level, it extends your rune duration up to 70%, which is around 6 minutes long. The cooldown of runes stays the same, so you just get a lot more XP every time you pop a rune. First job is very basic. Here's your mobbing skill you'll stick with throughout every job rank. Here's the teleport that teleports you horizontally and vertically, a bunch of various passives that boost your overall stats, and Magic Guard, which is a toggle that mitigates most damage you take to instead be subtracted from your mana bar instead of your health bar. Second job upgrades Mana Burst, gives you an up jump, and these two attacks. Firstly, Dragon Flash sends Myrrh dashing forward, and then rushing back and forth in an area, damaging all enemies caught within it. Who's Myrrh? Your dragon companion floating above your head. Every job rank this little lad grows up until you hit 4th job, where his appearance stays the same from here on out. Mine's already fully grown, but here's what he looks like at every job rank. Anyways, Dragon Flash has a 3.5 second duration and an 8 second cooldown. The second attack I mentioned, Wind Circle, damages enemies and knocks them back. If you use Dragon Flash and then Wind Circle while Dragon Flash is out and attacking, you cast your very first fusion skill, Wind Flash. It sends blades of wind flying towards enemies, homing in on them, dealing pretty good damage, including more damage to normal enemies. Subsequent wind blades hitting the same enemy reduces its damage by 35%. 3.5 second duration as well, and its cooldown is shared with Dragon Flash, being that it only comes out with that skill. While either Dragon or Wind Flash are out and attacking, you can also click this skill, Return, to have Myrrh immediately come back to you. When you do so, you activate Return Flash, which places a debuff on nearby enemies at Evan's location that makes them take 10% extra final damage from magic attack skills for a whole minute. The only things remaining here are all these various passives that increase stats like attack speed, int, extra damage when using Myrrh skills, and things like that. Third job is similar to second in that you get another Mana Burst upgrade, a bunch more various stat boosting passives, and some new Myrrh skills. Dragon Dive sends Myrrh slamming down in front of you, causing shockwaves and spikes to erupt all around him. 3.5 second duration, 8 second cooldown, and it also boosts your previous job's Myrrh skills. Thunder Circle simply makes a big flash of lightning above and all around you, and clicking Return after Dragon Dive casts Return Dive, which gives you 1 extra stage of attack speed to you and all nearby party members for a minute. Casting Dragon Dive followed by Thunder Circle instead casts Thunder Dive, which is like a normal dive, but sends out lightning balls that creep around on the ground until they hit enemies. You also get a new fusion with Dragon Flash. Cast Flash and then Thunder Circle to summon Thunder Flash, which is a giant lightning pentacle that Myrrh flies around between each point of, damaging all enemies at each point's location. Ending off third job, Evan also gets a buff, Elemental Decrease, which lowers the elemental resistance of all enemies you attack, as well as passively gives you final damage, and Magic Debris. Every time you attack with fusion skills, it leaves behind these little sparkles, up to 15 pieces maximum. Click the skill, and this debris flies right to enemies, dealing a little bit of damage. No cooldown, and you can right-click the skill to have the debris fly out automatically every time you build up 10 debris. Hey everyone, look! Look! 4th job has that Maple Warrior in Hero's Will that everyone else has. You also get another expected upgrade to Mana Burst, more passives, an upgrade to Magic Debris that ups the damage and decreases the formation cooldown by a very little bit, and a new buff that gives a bunch of defense and magic attack. They also get a kind of map-wide attack called Dark Fog, which passively ups Magic Debris' damage, as well as giving additional crit rate on just that skill. It also does damage to all nearby enemies on screen, 40 second cooldown. Now for the main course. Dragon Breath lets Mer breathe fire to all enemies in front of you, and ups previous Mer skill's damage, 10-second cooldown. Earth Circle simply just erupts rocks in front of you. Casting Dragon Breath into Earth Circle creates Earth Breath, which perches Mer up on a rock, shooting a fiery laser beam at a whole bunch of enemies, with a pretty large range too. Casting Dragon Breath into Wind Circle makes Wind Breath, which is just a big fiery cyclone shooting out of Mer's mouth, dealing big damage, and not knocking enemies back. It also has an additional effect that does extra damage to enemies with less than 30% health. Lastly for fusions, Dragon Dive into Earth Circle casts Earth Dive, which sets up a bunch of rocks that Mer bashes through, dealing pretty nice damage per rock smashed through. And of course, to end off all of 4th job, cast Dragon Breath and Return to summon Return Flame, which places down fire all around you that damages enemies that walk into it, 30-second duration. Hyper Skill sends you flying right off the bat. No, seriously, Dragon Master is a 10-second iframe that once activated, lets you hop on Mer's back and ride him around for a bit of time. If you press and hold the skill key again, Mer shoots a giant line of fire out his mouth, and you can still move around during it. Once you release the fire breathing part of the skill, or if you use up the whole 10-second duration, you dismount Mer and go back to normal. When you dismount, you're invincible for an extra second, and when you initially mount, there's a delay of 0.3 seconds before the iframe starts. 4-minute cooldown, which reduces significantly if you dismount early, potentially going down to an 80-second cooldown. Heroic Memories is the epic adventure equivalent for Evan. 10% damage for you and all other hero classes in the party, like Aran, Mercedes, etc. 1 minute uptime, 2-minute cooldown. Your 3rd hyper skill, Summon Onyx Dragon, does exactly as the skill's name suggests. Click it, and you summon Onyx Dragon. The Onyx Dragon lasts for 40 seconds and damages all enemies it touches and attacks, as well as gives you some status resistance while it's out and attacking. 80-second cooldown. Hyper passives I want to structure a little differently, as there's something important to highlight that I don't want to keep mentioning multiple times. See all these passives that start with the name Speedy? You want all of them. For all your dragon skills, it reduces their cooldown by 25%. Since Fusions is pretty much the lifeblood of Evan, there's no reason to not get all 3 of these, as they're all skills you'll be spamming often anyways. You get a total of 5 SP points, so we have 2 left to choose from, and you get a good choice for which 2 you think would work best for you. For bossing, Rolling Thunder for 1 extra attack during Thunder Flash, and Earth Shattering Dive for extra damage on, well, Earth Dive. For grinding, Howling Wind for an extra Wind Blade flying out at enemies, and Lungs of Stone for extra mobbing with Earth Breath. Thunder Overload isn't really all that great because Thunder Dive itself is pretty subpar for everything, and Cyclone Breaths is pretty okay on its own, but there's better options that simply do more overall damage. It just ups the damage threshold of Wind Breath's 30% health effect, as well as ups the damage when it reaches that newer threshold of 35%. Not bad, but outclassed by the other passives. 5th job is like night and day when it comes to Evan's bossing potential. Like, this entire job rank feels completely catered towards making your bossing like 18 times stronger. Starting with Spiral of Mana. You can either cast skills by placing it on its own button and clicking it right after Mana Burst, or if you right-click the skill, you have a new way to activate it by casting Mana Burst, and then pressing down and casting Mana Burst again. All it does is place a summon that attacks all enemies being barraged by it. You can only have 1 out at a time, it has a 7-second duration, and no cooldown. Fusion skills time, fusion skills time. Dragon Slam slams Mer down in front of you, pretty much identically to how Dragon Dive does. I think it's the same animation, and it deals big damage. 2.5-second duration, 20-second cooldown, and casting Return during it summons Ludicrous Speed, which is a black and green vortex that hurts all enemies that go near it for 5 seconds. Elemental Barrage is an odd skill that apparently works with all of Mer's dragon attacks. Click the skill and you do a bunch of elemental attacks in front of you, with each element giving you 5% final damage each. It does 4 total elemental attacks and has a 1-minute cooldown. It also states that when you cast Elemental Barrage while lying down, the MP cost multiplies by 5? I honestly have no idea what the point of that is, but anyways. If you cast Dragon Slam and follow that up with Elemental Barrage, you shoot out a new attack called Worm King's Breath, which makes Mer into this huge menacing dragon, blasting everything beneath him with fire and various elements flashing occasionally, dealing immense damage, and stays out and attacking for 4 seconds. We gotta end off Evan's skills with a bang, don't we? Elemental Radiance places a big ol' sigil above you for 12 seconds. In those 12 seconds, you have to cast various spells, usually Mana Burst or any of your various fusion spells. Each time you do, the sigil builds up 1 magic attack, and hitting enemies with said skills once per summon grants 3 magic attack. Once it hits 25, you win. A giant beam of power floods out and blasts enemies for 12 whole seconds after it activates, annihilating pretty much everything it's blasting at, as well as ignoring 100% of enemy defenses. This is one of your strongest skills, if not the absolute strongest, and it has a 3-minute cooldown regardless if you manage to charge it in time or not. Make sure you prepare this skill properly. In a less flashy fashion, shared skills time, starting with the hero ones. Maple World Goddess's Blessing no longer builds up charges as of this most recent patch. Instead, it's just a skill that very simply gives you a damage buff and juices up your Maple Warrior to give way more stats. 2-minute cooldown. Freud's Wisdom is named after the former Dragon Master that used succeeded. Oh, it also gives a 30-second buff that stacks up to 6 times. The first stack gives skill cooldown reduction, stack 2 gives status resistance, stack 3 gives all stats, stack 4 gives attack and magic attack, stack 5 gives boss damage, and stack 6 gives you a 30-second iframe. The skill has a 25-second cooldown in between each stack, meaning you have 5 seconds near the end of every stack to hit that button to build it up further. All the stacks go away if you die at any point while you have it on, and once it goes away or stops in any way, it has a 4-minute cooldown. Thankfully, you can put it on an alert to know when you can use it again, which may help you out a little bit. And now, shared mage skills. Ethereal Form is a pseudo iframe that doesn't protect against everything, acting more like Darksight more than anything else, but still mitigates a lot of damage you'd normally take from bosses. Additionally, it also gives some super stance while it's active. 3-second duration, 1-minute cooldown. Lastly, Mana Overload is a toggle that gives you more final damage with nearly all your attacks, at the cost of a little extra percentage of mana per skill you cast. The toggle stays on permanently once on, but once initially turned on, goes on a 1-minute cooldown. Evan is a class I have a lot of strong opinions on, but I'm putting all that aside for the time being to save you the trouble of struggling through them by making them easy. Let's start by making fusions easier, summed up into a couple categories. For grinding, there's really only 2 main ones, but I'll cover all 3 and why. For ones you want to use, you have Dragon Flash combined with Wind Circle to make Wind Flash, and Dragon Breath with Earth Circle to make Earth Breath. Wind Flash is a good area of effect skill, and Earth Breath has decent mobbing and is one of your longest range skills in general. You also have the option of Dragon Dive fused with Thunder Circle to create Thunder Dive, but this one is pretty slow and situational, as it just creeps along on the ground. It's just not a very good skill right now. Bossing fusions would be Dragon Breath combined with Wind Circle to make Wind Breath, Dragon Flash with Thunder Circle to make Thunder Flash, and Dragon Dive with Earth Circle to make Earth Dive. Positioning matters for all 3 of these if you're aiming to get all their hits off, so familiarize yourself with those hitboxes. These fusions can all be mixed and matched too, like for instance using Thunder Flash while grinding, or Earth Breath and Wind Flash for extra height and range in bosses, are things that I do, especially for bosses like Damien when he goes way high up into the air and nothing else really reaches him. It should also be a given that both Dragon Slam and its fusion with Elemental Barrage to make Worm King's Breath are good for both grinding and bossing. Big damage in hitbox, and it comes up every minute. Don't forget to get all the speedy hyper passives too, so you can dish all these out pretty much constantly on a rotation. Returning is important. Remember, tap dive and then return for a 1-minute attack speed buff, flash and return for a 1-minute enemy debuff, breath in return for a 30-second damage overtime on the ground, and Dragon Slam in return for a 5-second vortex that hurts nearby enemies. You can also do that with Worm King too, by the way. I don't know if I ever mentioned that. Beyond just giving you various bonuses when you return after dragon skills, it also allows you to snap into casting more dragon and fusion skills, removing the end lag after all the damage has come out of the skill, and reposition in case the boss moves around, of course. It's essentially your animation canceling skill, just so long as the skill's name starts with the word dragon. For both the sections I just covered, it helps to set your keyboard up in a way that's comfortable for you to remember which buttons to click when. Especially Return and Mana Burst, since you'll be slapping those buttons in between pretty much every fusion or dragon skill you do. One way could be to have all your dragon skills on one row, with the elemental ones on another, either right above or below it. Whatever is the most comfortable to you. Don't listen to me for what's most comfortable because my keyboard layouts usually look like this. So I'm not the model example of comfort or ease. I just usually see people place their class's skills somewhere on the left side of the keyboard while they move around with the right, so I figured that's worth mentioning. Okay, listen, just put magic debris on autocast by right-clicking it. The damage difference between manually clicking it every time versus just having it go off automatically is so tiny that it's just not worth worrying over. It's insanely min-maxy. Until they change it someday to maybe have some bigger benefits to using it manually, save yourself the stress, put it on autocast. For grinding, Evan is a pretty comfortable class. Pop an Nerdist Shower and Onyx Dragon in one area of the map, and cycle around whichever fusion skills would fit best in that moment for where you're standing. Usually in the middle of platforms when casting Wind Flash, and bottom platform for Earth Breath. You can also place a Spiral of Mana occasionally for more summon coverage, but that's a much more active option. It's not necessary most of the time, given your fusion skills already cover most maps, but it does give more coverage in bigger maps, or when you go to loot all your drops. For bossing, again, positioning of your fusion skills matters a whole lot. Additionally, you'll absolutely want to remember to use Spiral of Mana every 7 or so seconds. When Myrrh is out and attacking with either a dragon skill or a fusion skill, and a boss knocks you back, flings you into the air, or stuns you, Myrrh keeps attacking separate from you, ensuring you always have some damage coming out even in times of turmoil. Elemental Radiance is your most important setup in bosses, and failing to activate it just wastes it entirely, shoves it on cooldown, and does no damage. So here's a couple easy to remember setups for getting Radiance out as quick as possible. Fusion combos in any order, immediately return after each fusion, Dark Fog thrown in the mix. Or, Dragon Slam into Elemental Barrage, cast Dark Fog, and spam Mana Burst. It's also worth noting you can cast Magic Debris, even when it's on auto mode, to charge Elemental Radiance a little bit faster. You have 12 seconds to get it out, so it's fairly lenient, but practicing to get it out as fast as you can helps when you need it quickly. While your iframe lasts for up to 10 seconds, it still has a slight starting delay of 0.3 seconds, so make sure to use it slightly before you are about to be hit. I think that covers most bossing related things.
Evan has more animation canceling?
So one thing that I never knew about that I found out only once I started making this guide is Evan has animation cancels. Evan Discord also calls this circle canceling, so that's what I'm gonna call it too. Essentially, it's this. Click Mana Burst and immediately follow that up with any fusion combo. Since this is typically done for maximizing DPS in bossing, a safe choice would be Thunder Flash or Earth Dive, but you can do any fusions. This lets both Evan and Myrrh attack independently from each other. That's it, you've done it. From here, just either let the attack play out while casting just Mana Burst in between, or you could also click Return, immediately followed by Mana Burst for another quick animation cancel. From there, you could rotate around into an immediate fusion skill after returning, and just keep that rotation up of Mana Burst into fusion, Mana Burst during the fusion animation, into return and Mana Burst, and repeat. Summed up, you're pretty much just doing 2 to 3 actions at once, keeping in mind the order you press each one in. It takes a little getting used to, but if you plan on getting deep into Evan, either as a main or boss mule, learning this sets you apart from the rest in terms of damage by squeezing in a few extra attacks during the time you'd normally be stuck in an animation. Really, it's not that hard, but it does make Evan into a pseudo combo class, remembering fast, short strings of 2 to 3 skills each. I'm still new to this side of Evan myself, but from all my testing I've done for this video, it seems pretty lenient timing-wise. Just a little tricky to teach yourself to whip those out fast every time. I'll include the video the Evan Discord uses to explain it in this video's description, but the graphs may be a bit confusing to untangle. You can get by as an Evan without needing to learn this, as I did, but yeah, it's there if you're looking for more damage out of this class. Evan is one of those few remaining classes that has their own equip tab for armor you throw onto Myrrh, known as Dragon Armor. Long story short, you can buy some from Neville in most major towns, crafting via smithing can get you the reverse set, which gives slightly higher stats, and the best in slot Dragon Armor set, known as Abyss, requires recipes that you can currently only get randomly from Fedric, who randomly appears after every successful Chaos Root Abyss boss clear. That's it. He's not even guaranteed to have them. It's not really worth pursuing this, as the difference between Reverse and Abyss is so minimal stats-wise, and the recipes only craft one of each. It's just a huge pain worrying over Abyss, so don't. If you get lucky and run into one, then yeah, craft it for some very tiny gains, why not? There's no set effect. Otherwise, until Nexon gives a more sustainable, reliable, non-RNG way of getting these Abyss armor pieces, you'll do just fine with whatever you can toss into those slots. Should Evan use a staff or a wand? Staff. I'm pretty sure every mage class that has this choice will always 100% of the time want to choose staff. You lose no attack speed, as spell speed is a separate entity, and staves just give way more magic attack when compared to wands. There's no benefit to using a wand over a staff other than how it looks, and 5% extra crit rate. Trust me, the extra magic attack is way more worth it than 5% extra crit rate. You get crit rate from so many sources nowadays. Anyways, inner ability is straightforward. For a bossing setup, you'll want attack speed +1 for the first line, so you can reach the attack speed cap, and second and third lines you'll want boss damage and abnormal status damage, for more damage to bosses and debuffed enemies, respectively. Cooldown skip is a fine enough settle too, as that allows you to potentially get more thunder flashes and earth dives out, but purely by chance. For a grinding preset / setup, the usual drop, meso, and normal monster damage is always useful. Are link skills the same as every other class? Yeah, they are. For grinding, hey look at that, you have Evan's link skill built in. That means your setup is pretty much the same. Go for Aran and Mercedes for more XP sources, Lara for more normal enemy damage, and fill in the gaps with whatever else you have damage-wise. A layout looking similar to this is good enough. For bossing, yeah, anything that gives extra damage, IED, boss damage, debuff damage from Explorer Mage and Thief links, crit damage, you get the idea, right? A layout like this should be good too. And of course, Resistance Link is always handy in every boss fight. 8 extra seconds of invincibility every time you revive. Trinodes are nice and neat. Evan wants 2, and the first is the most important, consisting of all your elemental circle skills: wind, thunder, and earth. You'll be comboing these often into everything, and they all boost their fusion counterparts. It just makes sense to prioritize this. The second Trinode consists of Mana Burst and 2 of your dragon skills, Dragon Flash and Dragon Breath. Mana Burst is self-explanatory, you use it as your main skill you spam. The reason you want Dragon Flash and Breath over Dive though, is because Dive doesn't do that much damage on its own, only through its fusions. Dragon Flash is here because at 6th job it gets a Hexa Mastery that boosts its damage alongside its fusions, and Dragon Breath is here because it also increases the damage of Return Flame, the flames left on the ground. This is probably subject to change whenever Nexon puts out an update giving Hexa boosts to all of Evan's Dragon and Circle skills, but until then these are the best options. Alternatively, later on down the line, you could boost some other skills like Dragon Spark and Magic Debris to squeeze in a little more extra damage, but that's if/when you get enough spare V-Matrix slots to stuff those into. Much less important. For Burst/BA, you pretty much just want to do a big ol' Elemental Radiance combo. Make sure your toggles like Magic Guard and Mana Overload are both on, buff up, and pop out all your return skills for some extra attack speed, final damage debuff, and a dot on the ground. From here, pop Summon Onyx Dragon, Heroic Memories, and Maple World Goddess's Blessing. If you have Will Skill, pop that right here too. Place down Elemental Radiance, and get ready to lash out with everything you got. Cycle around fusion skills like Thunder Flash, Earth Dive, and Wind Breath, remembering to rotate circle cancels in between each, alongside Mana Burst as their animations are playing out. Finish off Elemental Radiance with a Worm King's Breath fusion by clicking Dragon Slam into Elemental Barrage, and pop a B-Link to maximize damage. From here, you can keep cycling around your fusion skills and circle canceling until Elemental Barrage stops. Shorten down: toggles, buffs, return buffs, Onyx Dragon, Heroic Memories, Maple World Goddess's Blessing, Will Skill, Elemental Radiance, Circle Cancel fusion skills, Mana Burst in between those animations, Worm King's Breath, a B-Link, keep cycling Mana Burst and Circle Canceling. At 6th job, as Worm King and Elemental Radiance are both going off, you could toss in your Origin immediately after summoning Worm King for even more damage. I've scoured around for how to do an optimal burst on Evan, and I could not find any definitive answers like I do for literally every other class I've made a guide on to date. So I took some creative liberties and made my own, piecing together various resources scattered about. It's probably not the most optimal, but I tried my best to piece something together. Evan is a class I really want to love, and I do in some degrees for how they play when it comes to their fusion skills. Kind of. I just have issues with a lot of their mobility, range, and over-reliance on micromanaging all their fusions. Having to keep an eye on all their various cooldowns every few seconds. Like, I don't think Evan is bad at all. They just feel like they could use a hefty quality of life update that smooths out a lot of their playstyle, especially when it comes to things like failing to get an Elemental Radiance firing off in time, or them not having their up jump bound to a button, like Explorer Mages do, or their heavy reliance on maintaining their shortest duration return buffs, things like that. Regardless, I like the class after all is said and done, as evident by the fact I got mine to 6th job with a Hyperburning. They're cool enough if you wanted to put the effort into them. Thanks to the Evan Discord for not even having a class guide, but instead having a whole Evan website, explaining all kinds of things to get people started with learning Evan, including things like training setups in specific maps, various other Elemental Radiance combos, things like that. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's not perfect, but it's extremely useful for what is on there. Oh, also, thank you for watching my guide. If there's other classes you want me to make videos on in the near future, suggest some to me down in the comments. If you just like that I make MapleStory-centric videos, consider subscribing to the channel. By the time this video goes up, we should have the Oran and Shade remasters, so I might do one of those two next, as I'm also most likely going to be hyperburning one of them to 260. Though as always, if y'all want some other class to be covered before then, I'll shift gears and focus on making that instead. That's all.